Yes, we are live stream. Yay! It's funny because there's always a little bit of a delay with YouTube getting onto the live, but then there we go. We got the echo. So I got to get the, okay, good. Whew. We got the echo gone. Okay, good. Now I'm so excited. We are streaming live into Clubhouse. We are on YouTube live, and we have the amazing Linda Marlor, the tax lady extraordinaire. Yay! Welcome to the show, Linda.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I brought my magic wand so we can talk about magic deductions.
I love the magic wand. And that's exactly as entrepreneurs, as real estate agents, but also as real estate investors, there's all sorts of different aspects of taxes that are so often overlooked. And I know we've had conversations like this on my radio show for years. And so one of the things that we can never say it enough, because if we can just help one more person have one more deduction that they overlooked, it's so valuable. And I love your story. So we're going to talk about three things today. Number one, it's really important. I want people to understand your background and your passion for helping people understand how they can pay less in taxes, and it completely legitimately, not in some kind of weird gray area that, again, one of the things I love about it is you have the exact code, you understand it, you know it, and you love it. But number two, as entrepreneurs, we need to know what are all the tax deductions that we can get that will legitimately lower our business so that we can spend more money on growing our businesses. And then number three, we want to talk about the new tax laws. Anything that is being proposed, is being talked about, what should we be aware of? And sometimes we need that call to action if we need to call our congressmen, congresswomen, and get involved in the process, because so often we step back because we don't understand taxes. So, and of course, I'm going to put the one more ... We're going to have fun with Linda because she loves taxes and she has a magic wand that actually allows us, yay, there's a magic wand to go ahead and erase taxes, because the more you know, the more you can empower yourself to make good decisions. So let's go ahead and let's start at the beginning. Just so anyone who doesn't know you, which I think it's a shame if they don't, the amazing thing you have taught continuing education classes, not only for licensed real estate agents, and I'm licensed in Virginia, DC, and Maryland, but I think it's so important that as an entrepreneur, I've always owned multiple businesses. I've never been good at just doing one thing. I've always loved doing multiple businesses. And as entrepreneurs, we need to know about these tax deductions. And there's so many that we just don't understand. So you come from a background of being a licensed real estate agent. Will you share your story with us?
Oh, yes. It was all just totally by accident, because when I went to college, I was studying to be a simultaneous interpreter because I speak several languages. And after a year or so, I realized that I would have to spend the rest of my life perhaps traveling all over the world, which wouldn't be so bad, but also teaching. And at that time, when you're only 19 years old, you don't think about teaching as a career sometimes. So I asked my father, please, could I change my major to business, because in the school where I was studying language and linguistics at Georgetown, it was all girls, and I'd been to all girls schools all my life. So my father, of course, said, no, if you change your major, it's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to take you longer. And he said, and besides, you've never had a job. And I said, well, if I could get a job and keep a job for 6 months and show you that I could learn some business, then could I change? So he said, yes. So I had a girlfriend from high school who was keeping the books at a real estate company. And I was very lucky because it was a little real estate company and they did commercial and industrial real estate. And she didn't really need the money either. So she said, okay, you can do the job and I'll coach you how to do it. And then after 6 months, you can give it back to me. So when I was working there, they found out that my father was a doctor and he was the president of the medical association for DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And they said, you know something, you need to get a real estate license, because then you could sell things to your your father's friends. And besides that, you're not a very good bookkeeper. So please don't fire me. I'll do anything. He said, well, then you're going to take this book and you're going to learn it. And you have to, in these days, you had to go to Baltimore. In those days, you had to go to Baltimore to take the test. So bottom line, in order to keep the job, I studied the real estate book. I went to Baltimore. I took the test. I passed it. I don't know how I did that because I was desperate, I guess. And so I started doing real estate thanks to the broker who was coaching me about how to deal with investors. And after a few years, I made a lot of money while I was still in college. I had my own Mercedes paid for. I bought a beautiful house in Bethesda, right near my father's house. I made so much money. I got married. I had a baby. I had a live-in housekeeper to take care of my baby.
Wow.
And then I realized I was paying an awful lot of tax. So I decided, whoops, we got to figure out how to do this. So things in real estate were very easy, to sell. You sell one office building a year, and that was all the money you needed. So I started working part-time with H&R Block, and that was fun. I found something that was really exciting. When you work at doing taxes, people come in the door, you do their tax return, you save them money, they leave and they're happy. It wasn't like in real estate where you'd show maybe the same building show it 100 times and nobody would buy it. Although if they did, that was my money for the whole year. So I realized that, wow, but with taxes, the person comes in, they're happy when they leave, they pay you. And that was really, something constructive. So I said, as much as I love real estate and it makes me a lot of money, as soon as I get a little extra money, which I soon got, I'm going to start my own little tax company. So after 2 years of working at Block, I started Tax Masters in the upper floor of our real estate office. We had an empty floor of offices. And that's how my company got started, Tax Masters Inc. And ever since, I've spent all of my time helping realtors save money on their taxes, because I realized that, if you work for a company and you have a W-2 form, that's one thing. And it can be a complicated tax return. But if you're self-employed, you don't have a boss. You're your boss, and it's up to you to save money for your retirement. You have to be responsible for your own healthcare insurance. Back in those days, that wasn't such a big expense. But things get much more complicated, because if you're an employee, of course, you can't deduct driving and back and forth to work. That's commuting. But the minute you become self-employed, guess what? Your car becomes probably your biggest deduction. So everything it was wonderful. And it just, one client would come in and then they'd send their friends, and my company grew and grew and grew. At first, I only hired women. So the Washington Post would come out, ABC, NBC, CBS, and they would do interviews. Oh, this is Linda Marlor, and she has the only all-woman accounting company or tax accounting company in the Washington metropolitan area. So we got a lot of advertising for free, thanks to articles in the Washington Post and also on television. And this just made my business grow and grow. And pretty soon I realized that real estate, I would kept my license, of course, but real estate was just sort of a side thing compared to taxes. So I've spent the whole rest of my life, and that's quite a bit because I already have 6 grandchildren, so I'm a little older now. And my whole life has been devoted to helping self-employed people, entrepreneurs, not just realtors. We have all kinds of self-employed people, doctors, lawyers, insurance brokers, all kinds of people who own any kind of little business or big business, travel agencies, and helping them save money on their taxes. So Jennifer, this is where the magic wand comes in, because deductions for those people save federal, state, Social Security, and Medicare tax. Whereas if you just have a personal deduction, like you've given money to charity or something like that, that only saves you federal and state tax. So I go for the big deductions. I want the ones that get the big bang for the buck.
Well, and you went through that really fast, but go ahead and explain that again. So for anyone who doesn't understand, if you're self-employed, or even, and the other thing is if you have a home-based business, because sometimes what we've seen, especially this year in 2021, we're seeing a lot of people start a business at home that they never had a business at home before, and now they started a business at home. And so now they're eligible because even if they have a W-2, if they're starting a business, they're entrepreneur, and they get that advantage, right? The four times the deduction, basically. That deduction ends up being times 4 instead of times 2, right?
Yes, and it's kind of complicated, but the best way to think about it is, let's say you live in a home, you have a mortgage on it, you have real estate taxes. And if you're a regular, normal citizen, you're a teacher, you work in a hospital as a nurse or something like that, or you're a CEO of a large company and you have a W-2 form. So great, wonderful. On your personal tax return, you get to deduct the real estate taxes, maybe not all of them, but the real estate taxes and your mortgage. And that's wonderful. It's absolutely fantastic. It saves you federal and state tax. But now, let's say you get a side gig, like you're starting to do part-time, perhaps real estate, or you have some kind of little business you're doing out of your home. I have a client, she does a spray suntan. I go to her house and I get my beautiful suntan, so I look like I've been to Key West with Jennifer, or something like that. So now you get to deduct part of your home as an office. I'll use my spray suntan lady. She has in her basement, a lower bedroom with a bathroom. So that whole bathroom has been converted to the spray suntan. So when we do her taxes, we get to deduct for her all of that bedroom and all of that bathroom, because that's her business location. She has her office in the bedroom part, and then she does the actual spraying of her clients in the bathroom part. So it ends up being about almost 10% of her home. So what does that mean? Now, not only do I get to take 90% of her mortgage and her real estate taxes on her personal part of the return, which saves how many taxes? Just 2, federal and state. But now I take 10% of the expense for her real estate taxes and her mortgage, and I deduct it as her office and home expense. And guess what? Yes, that's right. Yay, that's my girl. That saves her federal and state tax and Social Security and Medicare tax. So by dividing her house into the business portion and the personal portion, I get to save 2 more taxes on the business portion of it. And you would be amazed, Jennifer, you would be absolutely amazed at how few people know that they're entitled to claim an office and home expense. And this is well, it's not a recent deduction. In 1999, I helped get the laws changed, because back before 1999, if you claimed office and home, you could easily be audited. The IRS they would go nuts over it. It was almost an automatic audit. Matter of fact, one of the first audits I ever had, and this was 40 years ago, was for a client who did have an office in his home. And in those days, they actually wanted to come to the house and see it. And of course, I won the audit because, of course, I had done it correctly. Yes, right. I don't lose audits unless the client has told me a little fib. Sometimes that happens. But in any case, the laws in the old days used to be much more stringent. But however, in 1999, when they changed the law saying that anybody who has a business space in their home and they use that space regularly and exclusively for business. Now, it has to be an outside business. Unfortunately, it can't be like a teacher. And teachers, they have such a hard job, because not only do they have their work at school, but they bring home things. And they many times, and most of the time, they're, correcting papers, or they're writing their syllabus or something like that. And they usually have a space in their home they use for business. But because they are an employee receiving a W-2 form at the end of the year, they cannot deduct their home office. Or somebody like a nurse, where how nurses, they have to pay an extra malpractice insurance, and sometimes they have some kind of a uniform that they wear to work in, and they have their sphygmomanometer. That's the thing. That's the blood pressure cuff. I'm a doctor's daughter, so I know how to spell it. Or they also have their stethoscope, things like that. They have this equipment and things that they buy to be a nurse, whether it's at a hospital or at somebody's office. But they can't deduct those things either, because they're not self-employed. It's only the people who get the 1099 form at the end of the year, or they get income from the outside that nobody's withholding any taxes on. Those are the clients that I love helping the most, because they're entitled to a whole bunch of deductions that normal citizens who are not self-employed cannot claim. For instance, you as a realtor, Jennifer, you have your car. You actually have home office expense, and you have office and car expense, because my realtors tell me, at least before the COVID pandemic hit, they used to spend more time in their car than almost anywhere, sometimes as much as sleeping at night. Yeah. How many days have you spent in your car recently? A little, maybe a little more than before.
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, it's amazing because, well, and Washington, D.C., I'm licensed in Maryland, D.C., and Virginia. And so you're driving around 3 different jurisdictions, and it can put a lot of miles on that car. And you just spend a lot of time in the car, which is great for, listening to podcasts or listening to books on CD or on whatever electronic device you use. It's so funny. You remember we used to call it books on tape way back when.
Yes, remember the tape? Yes.
Not tapes, not necessarily CDs, and maybe some kind of electronic app that you're listening to it on. Anyway, I digress. So it's really important also as an entrepreneur to realize, as real estate agents, we're entrepreneurs. We have our own business. But also, you mentioned one of the most overlooked deductions is that home and office expense. And again, it is so powerful to understand these deductions. But I know there are some other very, very common overlooked deductions. Will you talk about them?
Yes, and I love this one. I have 3, so we already did office and home. The second one is, well, it was invented to help farmers, because back in 1955, the Congress wanted people to be farmers. It was after the war, we needed food, and people were leaving the farm to go to cities. So what they decided to do, they said, we will treat farmers, which at that time was usually a husband and a wife, working together. We'll treat them as if they're a little company, and we'll let them deduct all of their medical bills as a business expense. So this law that was invented in the 1955 to help farmers, it also works for anybody who's self-employed who hires their spouse to work for them. Now, if you don't have a spouse, don't give up. You can still claim the deduction. You just have to be self-employed, which is easy because you are, and you also form a C corporation. And what this means is, well, if you're married, the example would be, we have Mary and she hires her husband, Fred. Now, Fred could be the director of a bank. He could have any full-time job he wants. But on weekends and sometimes weekdays at night, he helps Mary. He'll go out and he'll pound the signs, or he'll pick the signs up and bring them back home, for sale signs, or he'll deliver papers, or if she has to show a property at night, he'll go with her just to make sure everything is safe. So she can pay him a little tiny salary. She has to give him a salary. And now he becomes her employee, which means he better follow orders. And what happens, yes, but it also means that she can reimburse her employee for her employee's family's medical expense. So what happens is, every once in a while, Fred will go up to Mary and he'll say, hey, boss, my wife was very expensive this month. She went to the dentist and it was $500. And I bought new glasses and they were $500. And our children had some prescriptions, a couple hundred. I need to get reimbursed for my family's medical expense. So Mary, out of her business account, which saves 4 taxes, federal, state, Social Security, and Medicare, she'll write him a check for about $1,200. She will deduct it. Now, he's receiving the check, which goes into their family account, of course, but it's not taxable because it's not a payment, it's a reimbursement, and reimbursements are not taxable. So now all of that family's medical expense for the whole year, whether it's any unreimbursed medical expense that it wasn't covered by insurance, or the actual cost of insurance itself, all of those things are a business deduction. Now, yes, if she had not hired her husband, and sometimes it's the husband who's self-employed, he's a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever, he hires the wife. But if you don't hire your spouse, or if you don't hire yourself in your own corporation, then your medical bills are just about worth zero. Because in order to claim medical, they have to exceed 7.5% of your adjusted gross income, not your net income, your adjusted gross income. So we say we have a husband and wife, they each make $50,000. Their income at that point would be 100,000. So the first 7,500 of medical that they incur is not the least bit deductible. However, the minute one of them hires the other, all of that first 7,500 becomes deductible. I call this alchemy. It's sort of like you're taking lead and turning it into gold. What I'm doing is I'm taking non-deductible personal expenses, and I just turned them into fully deductible business expenses. So from saving 0 taxes to 4 taxes. Which would you rather save, Jennifer, 0 or 4?
4 taxes. And I think that's the other thing is understanding that it's 4 different taxes. So that ends up compounding your savings by, multiple of 4. I mean, that's a really big deal. And again, that's why I said to you at the top of the hour that this is so often overlooked. And again, because taxes are something that most people go, I don't understand. And so they just, they leave it to their accountant, but sometimes an accountant, and I know you with your firm with Tax Masters, you have no problem. If people are interested, you will review their last year's tax returns. And then you take the school teacher approach and you pull out your red pen and you start circling all of the deductions that were missed and how much extra money that someone paid to the IRS because they didn't understand all the deductions. And I always love that scenario or that analogy in that, you get the school teacher, and part of it is because if we don't understand it, we won't be able to apply it. We won't be able to go into action. And I think that is so, so important. So 4 times the taxes. So something you just talked about going from a personal expense to a business expense, and then being able to take 4 different ways, you're going to get a tax benefit from it, which is so, so important. So we talked about the number one most overlooked tax deduction, of course, is the in-home office. And all of us, I mean, come on, with the pandemic, we've all ended up working more from home than probably ever before. But if you're an entrepreneur, this is something you really need to understand. And then number 2, hiring a spouse and being able to deduct all of your medical expenses. Now, what is the number 3 of most overlooked tax deduction for all of us who are entrepreneurs?
Okay, this is a super one, and this one will take care of you for the future. Because 20 years ago, exactly 20 years ago in 2001, Congress realized that the Bureau of Labor Statistics had proven that 95% of every retired person in this wonderful, powerful country in which we live was financially dependent every month on the help of a check from either welfare, their church, their children, or Social Security. That is just an appalling figure. If you think about it, that 95% of everybody retired then and probably still today, they cannot survive month to month without that Social Security check coming in or help from their church or their children or God forbid, even welfare. No, we don't want that to happen. Well, don't count on your church, children, welfare, and Social Security. You count on yourself. Now, when you're self-employed, who's your boss? You are your boss. That means you need to provide for your retirement because you're not going to manage on Social Security, that's for sure. You need to open up what's called a solo 401k. Now, this was invented exactly 20 years ago this year, and it only costs, well, the ones that I like, and I don't sell them, they're about $160 a year. Now, for $160 a year, you open up your solo 401k account. You put money into it, whatever you could afford at the end of the year, and you don't have to put the money in until actually October 15th of the following year. But if you have a solo 401k, it's a qualified account. Whereas if you have the other SEP or IRA, those are unqualified accounts, and we don't want those because what sounds better, qualified or unqualified? Well, I think qualified. When you have a qualified solo 401k, number one, it is 100% protected from lawsuits, creditors, and bankruptcy. This is so important. Number two, you can put more money into it than you can put into an IRA or a SEP. And number three, guess what? You can borrow from it at any time for any reason whatsoever. I borrowed from my 401k when my younger daughter went to law school. Actually, I had two children in law school at the same time. And when my younger daughter went to law school up in Baltimore, I borrowed some money out of my solo 401k to buy a little townhouse up in Baltimore for about $135,000. And after 3 years, she graduated law school. She passed the bar the first time, no problems. I decided to sell that little townhouse. Well, 135 by then in 3 years had gone up to 210,000. So I made a lovely profit on the townhouse, okay? And that profit paid for all of her law school expenses. Plus,
Yay!
yes, yay, yay, yay. Plus, if I hadn't had the money from my solo 401k, then I wouldn't have been able to afford the down payment on the little townhouse. So by having money in your solo 401k, now I don't want you to take the money out. Sometimes clients will say, can I take the money out to buy a boat? No. Yes, you can, but don't tell them. Or a gentleman called, he wanted to take the money out to buy a motorcycle. I said, no, you can't do that either. He said, you sound just like my wife. And the funny thing was, I told him he couldn't do it. And about 5 minutes later, he called me back. He said, Linda, you lied to me. He said, I just talked to Mark. That's my investment fellow. He said, and Mark told me I'm allowed to take the money out for any reason. I said, yes, that's true, but not if you're my client. I only want you to remove the money if it's to buy an investment property or something that's going to be worth something at the end of it, not a motorcycle. Oh. She said, well, you sound just like my wife. So in any case, the solo 401k, just remember, it's the only qualified account available to self-employed people. Now, I'm not going to mention DB accounts because when you have a DB account, you're committed to put in a certain amount every year. And people who have fluctuating income, for instance, from real estate, then your income, you don't know what it's going to be. And when you have a solo 401k, each year you can decide you're either going to put in zero. Don't do that if you're my client. Or you can put in 20% of your income plus $19,500 up to a maximum of about $60-some thousand. So it's a huge deduction, number one. It saves you federal and state taxes, by the way. Plus, not only do you deduct the money, but you still have access to it. Whereas if you put the money into a SEP or an IRA, first of all, it's not qualified. It's not 100% protected from lawsuits, creditors, and bankruptcy, number one. Number two, besides not being qualified, you can only put in a certain amount. IRAs are limited, maybe 7,500, something like that. And number three, you cannot borrow at any time for any reason. If you have to take the money out, you pay tax and a penalty on it. So solo 401k, it's been around for 20 years. If your accountant or your investment advisor hasn't told you about it, that means they haven't read the laws in 20 years. You need to fire both of them. Okay, I'm sorry. I get really excited about these subjects.
Well, I love it because you get to pull out your magic wand and erase taxes. And that's a really big deal for all of us, especially as entrepreneurs, because we want to invest our money back into our business and not just give it away to the IRS. If we're going to give it away, we want to pick our charity, and our charity doesn't want it to be the IRS, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So now I wanted to shift gears and let's talk about the future with taxes. Like what is to be expected with the new laws with taxes? I don't know if you have any new ones that happened that people should be thinking about now. And then also the future of, I know you're always keeping it ear to, one, you're in the Washington, D.C. area, so it's hard not to, but what's happening up on Capitol Hill with the new tax laws and proposals and the ideas that are going to impact taxes?
Oh, well, first of all, I want to congratulate the real estate lobby, because they've done a really good job of protecting not only realtors, which of course is important, but also real estate investors and real estate owners. Back a couple of years ago, they wanted to change the law. This was in 2017. It was terrible. They were saying they didn't, when, you know, there is a law that says when a person sells a home, as long as they've lived in it 2 out of the previous 5 years, then they can exclude quite a bit of gain. If you're a single person, you could exclude 250,000, and if you're a married couple, you can exclude 500,000, which is wonderful. And that's only fair because, you know, in many foreign countries, Jennifer, when you sell your own home, there's no tax on the gain ever, no matter what. So the fact that we even will tax anything over 500 or 250, sometimes that amazes me. But guess what? What Congress in 2017 was planning on doing was saying, no, now you have to live in your house 5 out of the past 7 years. And the real estate lobby said, whoa, we don't like that. So they fought, and they won. So this is really, yes, really, yes. So I congratulate the real estate lobby for doing that. And, you know, realtors, and I'm still a realtor myself, we always donate every year to the PAC, the Political Action Committee.
Yeah, me too.
So,
it's
yes,
very effective, and they do really work hard, and they also inform us of what's going on, which I think is really important too, is knowing what's happening.
yes, yes. They've had our office testify. We testified in front of Congress for the DC government about some of these things. And they listened to us because they had the lobby behind them. They didn't just listen to tax masters. Actually, it was my son who did the testifying because he runs the company now. But they also have the real estate lobby behind them. So that was important. And one of the laws that slightly changed last year was the fact about, it's called a 1031 exchange. It's also called a starker, like kind, like purpose, tax deferred, tax free. All of those things actually mean the same thing. Basically, it's when an investor, let's say that Jennifer owns a lovely little house that she's renting out. And if she sells it, just outright sells it, Jennifer will be stuck with a big tax on it. However, if Jennifer sells it and takes the money and within a 180-day period purchases a new residence or a new, could be a gas station, could be a piece of land, something that's an investment, then Jennifer can avoid all the tax on the gain because she's invested it in something else. They talked about ending that completely back in 2017. I mean, it was going to go right off the table. Maybe it didn't because the president at that time owned rental properties, but in any case, that's still a possibility. So we have to watch out for Congress. You know, sometimes they try to slip things in when you're not looking. It'll be a bill that's about perhaps financing schools. Oh, that's great. Everybody's in favor of it. But somewhere in that bill, there could be something also there about taking away your tax-free exchanges. So we have to be careful on that one. And also, a few years ago, they did, in my opinion, a very terrible thing for the real estate business. And I really thought it was going to hurt the real estate business more than it did. But thank God it didn't. They limited, it's called the SALT, S-A-L-T. That stands for state and local taxes. And they've limited to $10,000 how much on each tax return you are allowed to claim for your state and local taxes. So let's say Jennifer owns a lovely house and the taxes, the real estate taxes that she pays every year on the value of her home are about $6,000, okay? In the past, that was always deductible, whether she used her home for business or not, it didn't matter. But now that number added to the amount she pays, and let's say that Jennifer lives in DC, Maryland, or Virginia, which of course she does, and she pays another $7,000 to her state. That's on her earned income, okay? So 6 and 7, that's 13,000. And she'd like to deduct that 13, wouldn't you, Jennifer? You paid it, right. You want to deduct it, yes. So, of course. Well, guess what? You only get a $10,000 deduction per tax return. So it doesn't matter whether Jennifer is married or single. On that tax return, she's only going to get a $10,000 deduction. But what happened to the other 3 that she's paying? The 6 and the 7 that make 13? It's lost and it's gone, and it doesn't get carried forward or anything like that. It is off the table. So this is a limitation that has stayed, and I keep thinking, they keep talking about perhaps eliminating it, but or at least making it less onerous for people, especially who live in states like we do, where we have pretty high real estate taxes. Virginia, the real estate taxes aren't quite as bad, but DC and Maryland have fairly high real estate taxes. My little house, when I bought it here 30 years ago, was only $3,000. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so much money I have to pay every year. Well, now my real estate taxes are almost $9,000. So, and that means I don't get to deduct hardly anything for Maryland. So no matter what I pay, I don't get it unless I claim office and home. Because if you have, yes, if you have an office and home expense, then you can deduct part of it for business and part of it for pleasure. But the SALT deduction, they be very careful. Congress, like they might try to slip it in or something like that. So if there's any way that you hear about it or you want to lobby for it, we don't want to lose that deduction, because here's what happens. Let's say that Jennifer is thinking about, maybe I'll buy a bigger house so I can have a bigger home office deduction and I can have a bigger space so I can entertain my clients, my friends and things. So, but she knows that if she buys this larger home, she's going to pay more real estate taxes. But will she get any tax benefit on her tax return? Nothing, because she's already limited to what she has. So Jennifer is very smart. She says, I'll just stay where I am and I'll just keep losing the 3,000 instead of losing more than 3,000 every year. So this could be bad. I think what happens is the general public doesn't understand this SALT limitation. So that's probably why it hasn't hurt the real estate market as much as I thought it was going to. And also the mortgage limitation on homes. When they changed back in 2017, they did some very naughty things, in my opinion. They also changed the amount that you can deduct on your home mortgage. It used to be limited to $1,100,000, and that was the total mortgage interest that the interest on that amount that you could deduct for your home and your second home. So let's say you had a first home and that mortgage was $900,000, and then you have a little beach cottage, you could deduct $200,000 on that one also. But they limited it now; it's lowered to $750,000. So what's happened? This means that, let's say Jennifer has an $800,000 mortgage on her present home, and she wants to go and buy another home that's a little bigger, right? She won't be able to deduct any more interest because the 800 is the most, 750 is the most she can claim. So anything over that won't be allowed anyway. So she has zero incentive to do a step up in the cost of her home. Now, this doesn't hurt people who are downsizing. I have a lot, I started my company over 40 years ago. So I have a lot of clients that are getting much older and they're downsizing. And then they call me and they say, I'm going to get a new smaller place or smaller place in a retirement community. Can I still deduct my mortgage? And I say, yes, you can, as long as it's under 750,000. So this doesn't hurt the people that are downsizing. But people who want to buy a bigger house, like in this where we live, the area of Great Falls, it's beautiful, or Potomac, those houses out there, some of them have several $1,000,000 mortgages, but the owners can't deduct them. Now, we won't feel so sorry for them, but we might feel sorry for somebody who's down in a lower tax bracket. By the way, I forgot to mention something on tax brackets, Jennifer. A lot of people, they don't know what their tax bracket is. Could we cover that?
Yeah, I think this is a really important one because again, it impacts people. But like I said, it's about education. How do you make good decisions about taxes, about your money, if you don't understand? So let's talk about tax brackets.
Yes, because when I talked about saving 2 taxes or 4 taxes, that's nice and it sounds like a good thing to do. But what is your tax bracket? Now, if you make about $75,000 or $80,000 as a single or married couple, your tax bracket that you will fall into on your federal tax return is about 22%, maybe up to 24. Now the tax brackets do go higher and they go up to 30, 37, and that's nice too. I'm sure Jennifer, you're in the highest one. But in any case, let's just talk about somebody who's in a normal tax bracket, somebody whose income 70, 80,000. That would be at least a minimum of 22%. Now, if you live in DC or Maryland, our tax brackets are about 8. Matter of fact, Maryland goes up to 8.75. But here in Maryland, where I live, if you have $3,000 of income taxable, you're automatically in the 8% tax bracket. So that gets added to your federal tax. So let's take 22 and 8. Now, those of you in Virginia, you're going to be really happy. I love doing Virginia tax returns. We have clients in 40 different states and 30 different countries all over the world. So we've got them everywhere. But Virginia is one of my favorite states because the tax bracket only goes up to 5.75. Isn't that wonderful? That's one of the lowest. Yes. But in any case, let's just say that the average tax bracket for a state and also DC is 8%. So you're in the 22% federal plus 8 Maryland. Okay, now we're up to 30%. That means on any income for which you don't have a tax deduction, you will lose 30% to the US government over the 70,000 or something.
Oh,
The first little brackets go up starting at 10, 5 or 10. Okay, now if you're self-employed, you also pay what? You pay self-employment tax, and it has 4 names. It can be called self-employment tax. It's also called Social Security, FICA, and it's also Medicare. So it's all those. Now, that's 15.3% of any dollar over $400 that you earn. So if you add your federal, your state, and your Social Security, we have 22 plus 8, that's 30, plus 15.3% Social Security. That's 45%. That means that if you have something that's deductible for business, you write it down on your tax return. You write it on your tax return, you enter that number, and the government will give you back 45%. So if Jennifer's thinking about buying a new computer for her office, a nice laptop, it's going to be about $2,000. She's going to get back 45%. That's $900. So the minute she writes down, or her accountant writes down on her tax return, new computer, $2,000, her taxes just went down by $900, cash in her pocket. Jennifer saves $900. Yes. So this is why business deductions are worth 15.3% more than personal deductions. And this is why it's so important to know your tax bracket. I should have covered that probably first, even at the beginning.
Well, but I think it's really important that, again, it's not overlooked. And that's why I said, so sometimes I think, oh, well, we've already talked about that, a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago. And I realize there's so often that, again, those basics are overlooked. I am not a huge football fan, but I do love the Vince Lombardi, the quote about every single year when they would start practice again, he would come in with a football and say, "This is a football." And meaning that we start from the basics, and we need to understand that, again, if you're a doctor or you're a real estate agent or whatever, and you're not a tax expert, then guess what? You need to be able to rely on the tax expert to help explain things to you enough that you can make good decisions on it. Just like you can't be a doctor, you can't be all the things, you can't be everything. So how do you rely on other people to come in and help you? And I always call that your yay team, because every single person on your yay team should help you say yay every day. And your tax person, I think it's so important because taxes, so often people are afraid. And I've also found this just around money in general, is that often there's like a ridge, almost like an invisible ridge about even asking a question, because someone doesn't want to appear that they don't know. They would rather pretend that they know all about it. And yet it's costing them so much money and I want to say for pride or for whatever reason, that they can't get past that invisible ridge that makes them feel like, I don't want to expose that I don't know all about taxes, or I don't know all about whatever money thing that's really preventing them. So I appreciate you talking about the tax brackets. Thank you, Linda.
Oh, and I love answering questions. So if anybody has a question, our website is tax-masters.com. We're the tax masters in Maryland, not the one in Texas that was on 60 Minutes, nothing to do with them. My company was first, and it's my company's name is spelled properly, Tax-Masters. But we'd be happy to review them. And you know, a lot of times people say they don't want to pay for a tax help, but what is it? There's a saying, something about if you think hiring a professional is expensive, then try hiring an amateur, because you don't know how many times somebody comes in and, we, like you mentioned, with their own tax return they've prepared, and I take my little red pencil and start circling all the things they missed. And I said, you know, all these deductions you've missed, $2,000 worth of deductions. You know how much that would have saved you? It would have saved you $900. And that's less than you'd pay to have your taxes done. Plus the fee you pay to get your taxes done is deductible when you're self-employed. So it's not just that, you know, we don't take out our own appendix. Jennifer, you and I, we don't cut our own hair, although I had to wait a long time to get teeth. Oh yeah, we don't do our own teeth. You can't do it yourself. You need someone who's an experienced. You know, last year, my office, we got 10,000 pages of updates on existing tax laws and new laws. Now I have 20 people in my office. You got to say that again. Yes, 10,000 pages of updates on existing law and the new laws. And there's a new laws coming every year, sometimes proposed new laws. So obviously nobody can read all that. The 20 people in my office, we can't. So what we would do is we divide it up. Now, mostly we specialize in anything to do with real estate or self-employed people. So we grab those first. Actually, I grab them first because usually I'm the one that's going to end up teaching them, since I don't actually meet with clients anymore. But the 20 people in our office, and by the way, if you call the office and want to ask a question, everybody in my office is smarter than I am. So don't ask for me, because I'm only good at teaching. They're good at researching and everything. But in any case, there's so many things you miss. You know, like with the office and home expense, people say, oh, it sounds like it's too much trouble. I said, well, guess what? If you claim office and home, you get to claim more car expense. And they'll say, what? And I say, well, because you have an office in your home, you can deduct the cost of driving your car. When actually Jennifer and I used to do, I was invited to be on Jennifer's show on Sirius XM. I would get up on Saturday morning and go over to Balducci's and get some muffins to take down to her wonderful interns. And so I would drive from my house in Bethesda to Eckington Place Northeast. Well, that was deductible because I was leaving from my home office. And then Jennifer, I would do Jennifer's show with her, and we'd have lots of fun and giggle and have muffins. And then I would drive home from Eckington Place back to Bethesda. And that was deductible because I was driving from one business location back to my home office. But if I don't have a home office, then my first trip of every day wouldn't be the least bit deductible. Now, my office is in Rockville, so the first trip is only 3 miles. Not that I go to the office every day. But and the same with Jennifer. She gets up in the morning. If she had a bad account and didn't claim home office, then her first trip to show a property or to go and list a property or even to just go and look at properties, that wouldn't be deductible. But if she has a home office, now she gets to deduct all those trips. So her car is more deductible and she saves more tax. So this is just one of the ways where a professional can help you so much, and of course save you aggravation. Because of course, if IRS is going to audit a tax return, who do you think they're going to pick? They're going to pick the return that's self-prepared. In other words, there's a line on the back of your return that says preparer's name. If there's no name there, you're a sitting target. But if there's a name there that's reputable, now be careful. Be careful who you use to do your taxes.
Yes.
We're handling 2 audits now for 2 ladies who are both realtors. They're out in Columbia, Maryland, and they went to what's called a problem preparer. In other words, this preparer was doing things that the IRS didn't like. So the IRS went in and took the computers, took the laptops, and now they're auditing every client that this man prepared. So these poor ladies, the only reason they're being audited is because they had the wrong preparer sign the tax return. But I have such good news. I have the best news. This preparer was an idiot. He didn't take office and home. He didn't have a medical reimbursement plan. He never told them about 401k. So even though we have to charge them $1,000 for the audit, we're getting them back over $20,000 each because of all the tax savings that they missed. So they both told me, thank God we got audited. So
Yeah,
how would you like that? To be glad to be audited?
a silver lining for sure. I was going to say it's so nice when there's a silver lining in, especially auditing, because auditing can feel like such an evaluation, invalidation.
Oh,
Oof.
yeah, they're not auditing you to complement your bookkeeping, let me tell you. No. There's another reason. Oh, we fight. I always have on my staff at least one former IRS person. Right now, I have Steve, and he's been with me many years, and he's never lost an audit that I know of. We had a client who had claimed, oh my gosh, 98,000 business miles in 1 year, because he's a real estate broker in 3 states, like you, sort of.
Yeah.
And he does a lot of driving, and so I don't know how he did it, but Steve won that audit. Yeah, we're not giving up anything. You know, you're legally allowed to reduce your taxes as much as possible. Nobody said you have to pay extra. And if you have anything extra, then you give it to your favorite charity. I like that. I've told that to my clients many times. Thank
Exactly.
you.
I think understanding all the deductions that you have and that what's available for you. And then just also understanding, like you said, 10,000 pages of updates that, that just came in. It's really important to understand all the new tax laws and what's going to happen, and just even anticipating what's happening. So I love that you keep your ear to the ground and that you're so passionate about teaching and sharing. So I want to go ahead. We're about to be finished here. So I want to ask John, do you have any questions for Linda about taxes today?
Sure. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Linda, for I so much appreciate your passion for taxes. You probably are more enthusiastic than anybody I've ever met. I appreciate that. I just got a quick question. Recently, and this is came out of Missouri. The MissouriBank.com, I think, is their actual website, but they were talking about the current administration is talking about requiring all deposits and outflows and withdrawals and deposits of $600 or more in your bank account being reported to the IRS. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh gosh, the bookkeeping will be tremendous. I don't see it happening in the near future. As you know already, they do keep track of $10,000 in cash. So if you walk into your bank with 10,000 cash or more, or if you withdraw 10,000 cash or more, the bank is required to do it. And I've had clients where they've had somebody pass away, and we've walked into the bank, and I go with them usually, and I explain, look, Daddy passed away, and we found this $35,000 in Daddy's briefcase in the attic, because Daddy didn't trust banks or something. And the bank does report it, and there's no problem. But I think if they start keeping track of 600 or more, the tremendous amount of bookkeeping will be required. It could be done, in the age of computers where we live now. It's a possibility. But first of all, we shouldn't, as long as we're not doing anything illegal, we shouldn't worry about it. But it's not something that I would endorse, and it's definitely something I would fight, because it's just going to waste, in my opinion, it's going to waste a lot of tax money on things that could be used. Maybe we should be helping little children in Appalachia and use that money for something else. I can think of better uses for our funds, tax funds.
I agree. Well,
yeah. John, that's a very good question.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I know we need to wrap it up because we only have a few minutes left. And so what I wanted to say is, do you know anything else that people should kind of keep their ear to the ground and keep an eye out for in Congress as far as what's happening and how it could impact them with taxes?
Well, everybody's tax situation is different. So perhaps they should speak to their accountant, who of course they use, and let their accountant advise them if there's anything, because it may be that they're involved in a certain business, or they have a certain deduction that's being threatened. And there's many times when I've enlisted some of my clients' help. Now, I'm lucky enough to have some clients that are involved in Congress, senators, congressmen, representatives. So I can call them up directly and yell at you, if you want a refund next year, you better not vote for this. Or if you want to be my client, you've been my client for 20 years, but I'll fire you if you endorse this. So I have a great advantage. And of course, when I tell my clients, I can write to all of my clients who are doctors or who are lawyers or are teachers and say, this is what's happening and this is what we need to do. And I can mobilize them into action. So actually, your accountant should be the funnel of your information, because you don't want to worry about everything. Let your accountant worry about what's good for you and let them help you. And I trust your accountant, just like you trust your doctor or your realtor. And oh my gosh, there was a lady in our neighborhood who was trying to sell her house on her own, and I went to knock on her door. I said, I am a realtor. I have to tell you this. And I've never sold a house. I only did commercial and industrial real estate. I said, but do you realize how much problem you are creating by selling your own house? Because it's called a FSBO, for sale by owner. I said, all you have to do is make one little mistake and you could be in court for years. You know, if you think if they think you've misrepresented something or something doesn't show up on the inspection. And I horrified this lady. I gave her a list of all the different things that can go wrong if you're for sale by owner. And she said, what should I do? I said, well, I have 3 clients that are realtors who happen to live in this neighborhood. And there were 3 different companies. What I would do if I were you, believe me, I would use one of them. I said, on my own houses that I've ever bought and sold my whole life, I have used an outside realtor, not myself, because I don't know how to do houses, even though I'm a real estate broker. So don't try to take your own appendix out. Don't cut your own hair. Don't sell your own house. And for heaven's sake, don't do your own taxes. You're missing something, I guarantee it.
So go ahead and tell people how they can get a hold of you, your website, and any other information.
Certainly, it's very simple. tax-masters.com. Don't forget the little hyphen. We're in Rockville, Maryland. We're on Executive Boulevard. If you want to reach us by telephone, it's 301-230-0200. And you just put down if you want to be a new client or you have a question, boom. And everybody there, like I tell you, is smarter than I am, far smarter than I am. I'm just really good about talking about it.
And I know you're always happy to review someone else's tax returns just to see what they missed and how.
I love it. Yeah. Yes, I love it. I love looking at the mess that is made by you. Sometimes it's not just the person themselves, but by their accountant, because they have an accountant who has no idea about claiming office and home, or hiring their spouse, or hiring themselves if they're self-employed, and also having a solo 401k. And there's many, those are just the top 3. I have it. If you want me to, we can do a show about the top 100 overlooked deductions in the tax code.
Oh my gosh. Well, I love you and I can't wait to have you back. I thank you so much for being here. And as you know, John, I know he'll come off his mic, but we always end the show with the yay. So I'm going to say 3, 2, 1. Yay!
Yay! Yay! Yay! Yay! Yay! Yay!